In this video, I'm going to be keeping a grasshopper as a pet, something almost no one has ever done before on YouTube. So today, we are going to be building one a bioactive enclosure, trying to get them to breed and hopefully lay some eggs, taking a deep dive into how fascinating these creatures are, and most importantly, we'll see if we can keep these grasshoppers alive longer than they ever could in the wild. So in order to do that, we need to go out and get some supplies. Except, there is one issue. My lab has been invaded by ants. I recently set up a bug enclosure and they completely invaded it. So if we do not deal with them first, there is no way we can set up a bioactive enclosure. The ants would just move right in and cause chaos. We have unlocked a side quest. Remove the ants. Let's start by heading to my local Lowe's to get some ant traps. I went straight to the pest control section to check out what they had. After looking at all my options, I chose these liquid ant baits. I bought them and got them back to the lab. Wasting no time, I placed a bunch on the floor. First, the ants find the bait, but little do they know that this gel is full of borax. It doesn't terminate them right away, because it works slowly, allowing the ants to go back to their colony to share it with the others, including the queen. And after a couple days, the colony will fall. Within minutes of me placing the traps, they were full of ants. They were coming to the trap non-stop. And days later, you could just see how many have fallen. Finally, our ant problem is under control, and the lab is safe and ready for the grasshopper's new enclosure. To start the build, I picked up this tropical terrarium kit. It comes loaded with a bunch of accessories to give us a nice foundation of stuff to work with. But the real reason I chose this enclosure is because it's designed with a vertical build, perfect for animals that thrive on climbing and exploring height, which is exactly what our grasshoppers need. Also, this enclosure is 30 gallons. Ideally, a grasshopper needs a 10-gallon setup. So with this 30-gallon terrarium, we can raise 3. I started unboxing our enclosure and opening it up to see exactly what we got in here. There is some cool stuff in here, but we definitely need to make some upgrades. Starting with this paper background. This does not look natural, and more importantly, it doesn't give our grasshopper anything useful. I tossed that garbage out. He is going to need a real surface he can climb. So I went online and ordered a cork background with the same dimensions as our enclosure. The following day, it arrived, and I unboxed it to see if it was an upgrade over the paper background. After getting a close look at it, this thing looks awesome. There's just one problem. It came a little bent. I'm worried it won't stick properly to the tank when we try to silicone it. So I loaded it up with some weights and 2 sandbags that weigh 50 pounds each. I let it sit for a couple days and then removed it all to get back to work. It looks like it helped out a bit. So I decided to move forward and start preparing our background. I cleaned the back of the tank with some isopropyl alcohol, which is going to help our background stick. Then I got out some animal safe silicone and covered the background with it. Finally, the enclosure was ready for me to place the cork background in. And of course, I put the weights back on top to help it adhere to the tank. 72 hours later, it was done drying, and it came out amazing. This cork background really transformed this enclosure, and there are no signs of it coming loose. Now, it is time to work on our drainage layer. I'm going to be using a combination of clay balls and small rocks. But before I pour those in, I'm going to make a false bottom using some egg crates. I don't want to overload the bottom of the tank with too much weight. So I took some measurements and then got out my Dremel to cut our egg crates into the sizes I needed. Once our egg crates were cut up, I used some zip ties to connect all the pieces. The false bottom was complete. I placed it inside to see if it would fit, and it came out perfect. Then I filled in the sides first with the clay balls, and then topped it off with the rocks. Now we need something to separate the drainage layer from the soil. So I grabbed some window mesh, cut it to size, and laid it down to create a clean barrier between the rocks and the soil. For our substrate, I am using reptile soil. It is the perfect soil for creating a bioactive setup. Now with the soil in place, I got out a bag of brand new leaf litter. I popped in some big leaves all around the soil and then scattered around some smaller bits. Then I started to dig the leaf litter a bit into the soil to help kickstart the bioactive cycle. Next, I rolled out a massive 6-foot piece of wood. This is going to be the backbone of our grasshoppers climbing kingdom. Obviously, it's way too big for the enclosure as is, so we need to cut it into smaller sections. I set up my hacksaw with a wood cutting blade and got to cutting this massive piece down. Once all the pieces were the size I wanted, I realized that some of the ends were a bit rough. I swapped out my hacksaw for my sander and then sanded them down so they won't harm the grasshopper. With the wood prepared and safe, I arranged all the pieces inside the enclosure, creating a natural and inviting layout for a grasshopper to climb and explore. By adding vertical climbing spaces, I'm giving them the opportunity to behave just like they would in the wild. It also helps maximize the enclosure space, turning it into a more of a three-dimensional environment rather than just a flat floor. With the groundwork of the enclosure finished, it's time to bring in some life. So I'm heading over to the reptile store. This place is always full of surprises. They have some of the coolest reptiles you'll ever see. But the real reason for this trip is to grab something that will make our enclosure truly come alive. Isopods and springtails. The springtails will control the mold, help with soil health, and recycle waste. When you open up the container, it looks like it's just full of dirt, but deep inside is an army of cleaners. I then spread the container across the bottom. Our next janitor is the powder orange isopods. These little guys are fun to watch as they scuttle through the soil. It looks like we got a lively bunch. I picked the orange powdered isopods because they kind of match our grasshopper's colors. When the grasshopper hops around on the wood and the isopods crawl through the leaves, it looks like they belong in the same little world. And funny enough, I even spotted some little squabbles between the isopods. Looks like they can be a little bit feisty too. Once I dumped these guys into the enclosure, they added so much life. Suddenly, the leaf litter was crawling with tiny movement. Even though isopods look like little bugs, they aren't actually insects. They're more like tiny crabs that live on land. One way to tell is that insects only have 6 legs, but isopods have 14 little legs. So even though they're small, they do a big job. They crawl around, dig tunnels, and clean up old leaves and leftover food, helping keep the enclosure healthy. But of course, my favorite part is those adorable faces. With our little janitors busy at work, it's time to add another layer of life to the enclosure: plants. But we also have to be careful about what plants we pick. Some plants are toxic or unsafe for grasshoppers. Any plant we pick out, our grasshoppers are going to try to eat it. I got back to the lab with my selected plants. I picked out 2 different types of coleus for the enclosure. Coleus is great because it's safe for our grasshopper to explore and nibble on a little. And the bright colors will make the tank look super lively. Plus, the leaves give the grasshopper places to hide, climb, and feel like they're really in a tiny forest of their own. I went ahead and started to plant them. But when I got to the second plant, I noticed something crawling on it. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. It looked kind of like a tiny millipede, but I wanted to make sure before putting it into the enclosure. So I grabbed my phone and used Google Lens to help identify it. It looks like this is a greenhouse millipede, which is awesome because this little guy is going to help maintain our enclosure. Greenhouse millipedes are non-toxic and detritivores, which means they eat decaying plant matter, leaf litter, and leftover food. They fit perfect in our bioactive cleanup crew. Leave a comment down below with some name suggestions for this little guy. Now with the plants in the habitat, it is time for some essential accessories. Luckily, our terrarium kit came equipped with some bulbs and lamps. Our grasshopper needs a place to keep warm. I set up the UVB, but they really don't need it. But after everything was set up for a few hours, I noticed this heat bulb was too weak for our grasshoppers. Luckily, I had an extra lamp and bulb in my lab. After getting that set up and testing it out, it worked perfectly. Next, I set up this food/water dish that suctions on right to the glass. This was probably the coolest thing that the kit came with. Not only is this thing functional, but it looks so cool. Our setup is finally done. I took a step back to admire what we have built. It looks like a little piece of nature in my lab. If you guys think it looks good, hit that subscribe button. Now the only thing this habitat is missing is the star of the show, and there he is, the grasshopper. This guy was ready to go inside his new home. I lowered the net into the habitat and he just sat there for a moment. After a few minutes of sitting still, he started to make his way into the enclosure slowly. These grasshoppers are known for being slow movers, but despite how slow they are, this guy was quick to inspect the whole habitat. He made his way onto the plant, and to my surprise, the leaves held him up pretty easily. Our grasshopper went straight for the background, resting there for a bit. He probably felt the heat and was attracted to it. While he was taking in the warmth, I was able to see just how cool he looked on this cork background. Definitely worth the extra money. It basically looks like he is climbing a giant tree. After he was warmed up, our grasshopper continued to explore the rest of the habitat. So far, it looks like we have built the perfect home for this grasshopper, which is great, because coming up, we'll be adding 2 more to this setup. Now with Skip in his new home, I have something I want to tell you guys. I just started up a brand new Snapchat. There, I'll be posting updates on things you guys don't see on the channel, like daily feedings, tank maintenance, updates on past projects, and even exciting upcoming projects. You guys can even snap me directly showing me your tanks or telling me video ideas. So go ahead and scan this QR code with your phone or look up Mr.TankYT to see exclusive content. After some more exploring, he finally paused at the top of the wood, giving us the perfect opportunity to take a closer look at this amazing insect. This is the eastern lubber grasshopper, the largest grasshopper in the United States. Even though they have wings, they are flightless and jump clumsily, but are very skilled climbers. Each foot has tiny hooks and pads that let them grip onto different surfaces. Even on smooth or vertical surfaces, they can hold on tight and move around confidently. One important thing to know about them is that they're toxic. Their bright yellow and orange colors act as a warning to predators. Finally, we can see that this is a male grasshopper because the abdomen is rounded and closed. Coming up, we'll see what a female's abdomen looks like. But now that we know that this is a male, we should give him a name. I think I'm going to name him Skip. We have been following Skip for a little now, after we put him in. I decided to leave him alone in his new habitat and check on him tomorrow. It was the next day and I found Skip on the substrate for the first time. After a couple minutes of him chilling on the bottom, I noticed he was eating some leaf litter. Even though leaf litter isn't their main food, grasshoppers sometimes nibble on it while they're exploring. It was really cool to see him interact with the ground layer for the first time. But it is better for grasshoppers to eat leafy greens and plants. The leaf litter is harder for him to digest and does not have much nutrition left in it since it's dead. Fresh greens provide him with water and vitamins. So I got him some romaine lettuce. Once that was in the habitat, Skip was quick to snack on it, using his mandibles to break it down. You could tell he really enjoyed it. While I was watching him eat, I noticed a springtail crawling on his face. This enclosure was full of life. It's like a mini ecosystem. Over the next couple days, Skip climbed every corner of the tank with ease. Till one day when I found him struggling with making his way around the enclosure. He was trying to cross from this piece of wood onto the plant, but the gap was a bit too big for him to just reach across. I thought maybe we were going to see him jump for the first time. But Skip built up his courage and reached out with both of his front legs and grabbed a hold of a leaf. After, he lowered himself down while still hanging onto the wood with his hind legs, finally giving him an angle to make it across. After seeing him conquer that, I knew it was time to introduce some new friends. Here we have the first of 2 females I'll be adding to the enclosure. She has a beautiful red color. I could not wait to see her in the enclosure. I placed the box into the habitat and she slowly made her way out, antenna twitching as she explored her new surroundings. Once she was in the tank, I got our second female ready to be moved in. But this one is a little bit different than the first one. I got her into the tank so we can get a better look. If you look closely, she is actually missing her back left leg. Even without one of her legs, she is still very active and has the ability to climb. I also noticed that this female is a lot larger than the first one. With eastern lubber grasshoppers, the females are actually bigger than the males. So not only is this female with the missing leg larger, but I think she is older due to the size difference. Some time went by with the females, now finally in the enclosure. Skip was no longer alone anymore. As the larger one started to make her way to climb the logs, our male finally came down to introduce himself. Antennas twitching, the two went right up to each other. He placed his foot right on top of her, and that's when she slowly started to make her way around him to head to the top. As she passed him, Skip started to turn back into her direction. Then he just sat there as she continued to climb up. He paused for a moment, and then started climbing back up. I think Skip is happy to see another grasshopper. She reached the top, and he was right on her tail. He kept following her, and then all of a sudden, he jumped straight onto her back. It looked like the two grasshoppers were going to start breeding. At this point, I decided to give them a little space and just observe. The male stayed on her back for a short while. They stayed like this for half a day. After I left them alone overnight, the next day they were not together anymore. If they were successful, we could get some potential eggs from the female. But this is just the beginning, because this video gets even crazier. Later that day, towards the top of the background, I found Skip breeding with the second female. It looks like our grasshoppers are getting along well, and the enclosure we have built has given them a space to thrive in. Our odds are increasing by the day to have little grasshoppers hopping around soon. After seeing them interact, I knew I had to keep a close eye on the females. Usually after breeding, Eastern lubber grasshoppers can lay eggs a couple weeks later or even just a few days. I continued to place food in the enclosure, but these guys are constantly exploring. I found them munching on the plants we put in here. That is why it was so crucial we bought plants that are not toxic for these guys, especially now that they may be carrying some special cargo. I also started to notice something a little funny and cool. Our grasshoppers would use their leg to scratch at their antennas. They were basically doing maintenance on their antennas. Grasshoppers use their antenna for sensing the world. They detect smells, touch, and even humidity. Maybe they were preparing to start searching the substrate for a place to lay their eggs. Eastern lubber grasshoppers need a substrate that is loose enough for digging but can still hold its shape. The reptile soil that we covered the drainage layer with should work for these grasshoppers. The next day, I found our females a lot more active on the substrate, and that's when I saw one of the females backing her abdomen down into the soil. She was carefully digging with her ovipositor. Once she was happy with the depth, she began laying her eggs. Beneath the surface, she was tucking away dozens of tiny eggs. But this wasn't the only time I saw her do this. Over the next couple hours and days, I found our females laying eggs throughout the habitat. It was crazy to think that underneath all of this soil were a bunch of eggs getting ready to turn into beautiful little creatures. So far, this project has been a major success. Skip was nearby, hoping to see his hard work pay off in the spring. I noticed that the grasshoppers would cover the holes they created to keep the pods hidden and keep the moisture inside. But I found an opportunity to take a look inside one of them before they covered it up, and I was able to spot an egg deep down in the hole. 3 things need to happen in order for these egg pods to hatch successfully. First, the soil needs to stay slightly moist. Second, the eggs need to be kept at a stable temperature range. And third, they need time, so they need to be kept away from predators. In order to prevent the soil from drying out, I'll be using my garden sprayer to mist the habitat and keep an eye on the moisture level of the soil. For step 2, I'm going to combine the use of both lamps. I can switch between a higher and lower wattage bulb to get the right temperature range throughout the day, and place a thermometer inside the enclosure so I don't have to be guessing what the temperature is at. Lastly, for step 3, I will make sure to keep the ants in check and not mess with the tank for the next couple months to give us the best chance at hatching these grasshoppers. This will not be easy, but I will try my best. It's official, we have unlocked a new quest. But this is not the only quest I have accepted. It is still my goal to try to keep the parents alive for as long as possible. You see, once Eastern lubber grasshoppers mate and lay their eggs, their energy is spent, which means their journey can come to an end at any moment. They start off as eggs, then become nymphs. They start to molt, then they enter adulthood. Once in adulthood, they start to breed with each other. After mating, they can start laying their eggs, and then the cycle continues every single year. Over the next couple days, I noticed the bigger female start to slow down, but the smaller female and Skip looked to be still young because they continued to breed. and feast on all types of stuff. Then, around day 50, I went to check on the habitat when I found the bigger female resting on the ground against the glass. Her antennas were down. It looks like she is starting to slow down. I gave her some time, but after seeing no movement for a while, it looks like she has finally passed. Even though this was sad to see, she had done her job, and the other two were still thriving in the enclosure. Thanks so much for following along. Please like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video. And here is another great video to watch. Peace.